Hello friends, how are you? I am sure you will be fine and enjoying the different topics areas of psychology. Now we will talk about in this lecture psychometric and cognitive approaches of intelligence. You know, intelligence, we say IQ. Now, what is IQ? How we are perceiving this concept of intelligence. When I say psychometric, the word psychometric is derived from two words, psycho plus metric. Psycho means psychological and metric means measurement. So, psychological measurement of intelligence is one approach and cognitive approach is the other approach. So, today's lecture will be on these approaches, psychometric and cognitive approaches of intelligence. The two approaches, psychometric and cognitive approaches, are discussed here. The word psychometric is composed of two words, psycho plus metry. I have told you, psycho means psychological and metry means measurement. Psychometry approach to intelligence means that how intelligence can be measured. Psychometry, psychological, metry means measure. If you want to measure memory, memory is psychological and measure of the memory is metric. You want to measure personality, personality is psychological concept and measurement of personality is the metric. Similarly, psychometry, psycho is your intelligence and metric is its measurement. So, psychometric means how intelligence can be measured. Now, how measurement of intelligence can be done, psychometric tradition we will talk about. Not many years after, Webb, Faulkner and mid 19th century founder of science of psychology had developed laboratory techniques for measuring psychological process. Sir Francis Galton's studies of differences among the people laid the groundwork for differential psychology. In 1890, James Kettle coined the term mental test. Now, what does it mean? You see, Sir Francis Galton, everybody knows the name of Sir Francis Galton. He was working on the individual differences. You know, he established an anthropometric lab and where he started measuring the different physical aspects, height, weight, etc., etc. Now, at that time, the method to measure intelligence was very crude. He developed a test which is known by the name Galton-Wissel test. Galton-Wissel test. You said, sir, tell me what is my intelligence. Galton gave a whistle and say, blow it. So, if you are blowing it with full power, whoo, you are very intelligent. If you are blowing with a very low power, your intelligence is very low, because psychology was not developed prior to that. But it was the Kettle who coined the term in 1890 as the mental test. I tell you, this Kettle was working in the lab of William Wundt, who established the first psychological laboratory. And when people started that the same experiment is done by the different scientists, there was some variation in the results. They reported to Wundt that said that there are differences in the result. Wundt said, little bit it happens, don't take it, it is an error, take it, there is nothing to worry. But Kettle said, no, if there are differences, there must be some reasons. So, despite of the opposition of his teacher, Kettle did his PhD and the topic of PhD of Kettle was individual differences in reaction time. How we react, individual differences. If there are individual differences, we will have to measure it. We will have to measure it. Now, why there is a need of a tailor? Because our size of the body is different. If the size of the body is different, then tailor takes the measure and stitches. If the size is same, then we can make the shirts and put on a showroom, you choose the color and take any, because the size is the same. If there is a individual difference, it must be measured. So, the term mental test actually came from the Galton. Now, how intelligence test emerged? Binet and rise of intelligence test. In 1904, when psychology was just emerging as an independent field, member of Paris School board approached Alfred Binet with an interesting request. Could he develop an objective method of identifying the children who in the language of the era were described as mentally retarded, so that they could be given a special education? Now, I have used this word with a caution. Could he develop an objective method of identifying the children who in the language of the era were described as being mentally retarded? Earlier, we were used to word mental retarded. Now, this word is a negative connotation. Now, we say mentally challenged. Now, we do not say mentally retarded, but because we are tracing the history, so I have used the word mentally retarded. Now, France government approached Binet. Binet was an educationist. He was a psychologist. They said, we want an objective method which could discriminate students according to their intelligence. One method is simply the teacher who teaches may tell he is superior, he is average, below average, poor. He can tell us very easily, but the teacher may be biased. He may not be scientific, he will not be objective. So, they said, we want an objective method. Since you are educationist, you are educational psychologist, you tell us what to do. So, Binet was already, I am talking now Binet and the rise of intelligence test. Binet was already at the work on related topic, so he agreed, he said, I will do. Thus, France public instruction minister formed a commission under the chairmanship of Binet in 1904. In 1904, a commission was established under the chairmanship of Binet to suggest a method to measure intelligence objectively, scientifically. In 1905, Binet with his colleague constructed first standardized intelligence test, which is known as Binet-Simon intelligence scale. The commission was formed in 1904. Binet with his colleague Simon, they constructed a first standardized test which is known by the name Binet-Simon intelligence scale. The Galton method was not standardized. Clear? What is standardized? I have talked about in my earlier lecture, reliability, validity, norms, etc., etc. So, this is the first standardized test in the field of psychology. In 1908, this scale was revised, in which the items were grouped by age with 16 items that each level from 3 to 13. The first was, homogeneous, items were for all the age group. In this, he grouped the item according to age. These items will be for a 3-year age group, for 4-year, 5-year, 6-year, 7-year, like that. In 1911, the test was revised again. Binet again revised this test. When this test was revised in 1911, unfortunately, Binet died this year. So, this revisions were stopped. But the credit to measure intelligence scientifically objective goes to Binet, since it was the first test in the world. Clear? So, all the people from the outside areas, America, Russia, France, India, they were attracted to this test. Binet test first standardized. So, Binet's test first standardized psychometric. We are talking psychometric approach. Psychometric approach, psychological measurement. It was revised and adopted for use in many countries. In USA, Lewis Terman was a scientist who also was attracted. Terman was a psychologist at Stanford University. In 1960, the Terman adopted the Binet's test as per American culture, and this test is known as Stanford Binet test. Terman was a working in the Stanford University. whenever you will construct any test, some items will be colored by your culture. This Binet's test was made in France. So, there must be some effect of the French culture on the items. So, he changed items here and there and made test accordingly for the American people, and he named this test as a Stanford Binet test. This test, Stanford Binet, we used in the practical exam for MA other courses. When you will do the practical work, we will tell you what is the Stanford Binet. I salute Terman, because Terman, you see gave his name nowhere. He named the test Stanford Binet. Binet, the original author whose test was adopted, and Stanford, the university from which he belongs. He could have named Stanford Terman test. So, Stanford Binet test came in America. Now, the concept of intelligence quotient was given by Stern in 1912. What is IQ? Measurement, psychometric approach. IQ is the ratio of mental age and chronological age. What is IQ? It is the ratio of your mental development and your physiological age. The IQ is calculated by the formula IQ is equal to MA upon CA, MA divided by CA into 100. Mental age, MA mental age, CA chronological age. Chronological age, that means age from your date of birth, your biological age divided by 100. Now, don't get confused here. Sometimes people get confused. Why? I will tell you the reason. They say that the concept of IQ was given by Terman. The concept of IQ, what is concept? Ratio of mental age and chronological age. Concept was given by Stern. Now, what the Terman did? Stanford Binet scale was the first intelligence scale in which the concept of IQ was used. Terman used this concept for the first time in his test, Stanford Binet test. So, Terman is the person who first used in intelligence test. Stern was the person who gave this concept. Now, you can say, even you see, why you multiply with 100? Try to be clear. We multiply by 100 not to calculate the percentage. It is multiply by 100 simply to remove the decimal. If you divide, your mental age is 16, your actual age is 14. So, 16 upon 14 into 100. You divide 16 by 14, it will become 1 point something. We take up to 2 decimals. For example, 1.12. Now, when 1.12 is multiplied by 100, it will become 112. Clear? To get rid of decimal, psychometric approach, we multiply by 100, and this multiplication by 100 was done by Terman. Clear? MA upon CA ratio, credit goes to Stern, divide by 100, using for the first time, credit goes to the Terman. After Binet scale, the intelligence tests, number of intelligence tests were constructed. Binet scale came, then the Terman scale came, number of tests were constructed. The popular I am naming, David Wechsler developed test for adults as well for children. Wechsler adult intelligence scale WAIS and Wechsler intelligence scale for children WISC are the prominent tests. After this, number of people started developing tests in the cognitive psychometric approach, and David Wechsler developed so many tests which I have named as the Wechsler WAIS, WISC. Even he has made for the pre-primary WPPIS. Now, curiosity may come in you that what about in India? Even in India, I tell you, Professor Rice at Lahore University adopted Binet test according to the Indian needs, according to the Indian culture. Why Lahore? Because Binet test was made in 1905 and it was last revised by Binet in 1911. After 1911, other countries were attracted. We got independence in 1947. Before 1947, India, Pakistan was the one country. So, we say in India, Rice at Lahore University. Clear? So, this was your psychometric approach. Now I come to the cognitive approach of intelligence. Psychologists interested in studying intelligence have moved beyond tests such as Stanford Binet and Wechsler scale in an attempt to try to identify the basic cognitive mechanisms and processes that underlie intelligence and that enable people to score high on an intelligence test. This work led to two major developments. Now, psychometric approach talks about simply IQ number, IQ 100, 110, if it is below this, below average, above this below average, if above 140 you are genius according to Terman, that is the psychometric quantitative. Cognitive approach says, okay, we have measured the intelligence. If you have high intelligence, what were the components because of your intelligence is high? What is the process of thinking? What is the process of reasoning? Not simply measuring, understanding those processes. Remember the different perspectives of the behavior. One of the perspective is cognitive approach, and in cognitive approach what we say, your thinking, your memory, your perception, your learning. So this approach says the mechanism and processes that underlie intelligence and enable people to score high on the intelligence test. Now this work has led to the two major developments. First, several tests have been constructed that are based on finding of cognitive psychology and our growing understanding of many aspects of cognition. Among these, the most noteworthy are the Kaufman assessment battery for children, Kaufman Adult Intelligence Scale 1993, Woodlock-Johnson test for cognitive ability 1989. The Woodlock-Johnson test attempted to measure both fluid and crystallized intelligence. Now you see, once you are able to identify the components of intelligence, whether there will be divergent thinking, convergent thinking, reasoning power, clear. Now once you know the processes, then you can construct the test on those dimensions. So cognitive approach is telling us the dimensions on which a test should be based. After all, if we will have to make the test, we will have to go to the psychometric approach to measure it. But cognitive approach is telling us that, house built of what? Bricks, sand, clear, lime. Similarly, intelligence composed of what? If I know the components, then I will able to measure those components. This is the contribution of the cognitive approach, and on this approach several tests which I have quoted just have been constructed. Second, a growing body of research had focused on finding that the speed with which individual performs simple perceptual and cognitive tasks, that the processing speed is often correlated with the scores on intelligence test. For example, significant correlation, that is minus 0.30 to 0.40, have been found between various measures of reaction time. One measures of processing speed and scores on the intelligence test. This has been given by the Fry and his. You see, processing speed, how much time you are taking to process that particular phenomenon. When we will talk about the Wechsler test in detail, we will talk about. In India, one of the very important psychometric tests is the Bhatia battery. That consists of 5 subscales: co-block, pass along, pattern drawing, picture construction, immediate memory. In co-block, design is given and you are the blocks. You have to arrange those blocks in the way that design is presented. Now, how much processing, how much time you are taking to complete it, this will will be correlated with your that ability. When you know the ability. And other and even more processing cognitive measure of intelligence is a measure known as inspection time. It reflects the minimum amount of time a particular stimulus must be exposed for an individual to make a judgment about it, and that meet some pre-established criterion of accuracy. you know, don't confuse it. I have used it exposed time. Earlier I said processing time. Exposed time means for how much time the stimulus must be shown to you that you can interpret intellectually, you can give a meaning. Should I present for 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, 1 minute. This is exposure time. Clear? Now, how much time you are taking in giving the meaning, that is the processing time. Clear? So, once you know the cognition, we can very well measure the exposure as well as the processing time. What does inspection time measure? Presumably, the amount of time an individual requires for intake of new visual information, what we have talked about. Supporters of this measure argue that this test, perceiving new information, is basic to all higher mental operations in the human thought. Derry and Stowe, 1986. Further, they noted that this measure is closely related to current theories of perception and decision making. Evidence indicates that inspection time is closely related to intelligence. If a person is intelligent, the inspection time will be less. If I am poor in intelligence, I am below average, then inspection time will be more. We sometimes say, just you show him, he will tell you what does it mean. Just show him. Show him, he is not able to tell that what does it mean. Show him more. He is taking more exposure time. So, that means less exposure time, more intelligent. More exposure time, less intelligent. Clear? So, we can in this way correlates. Various theories of intelligence try to explain what intelligence is. Now, there are various theories of intelligence. Now, I am talking about here. Thurston, 1938, suggested that intelligence is composed of 7 distinct primary mental abilities. Thurston says that intelligence is composed of 7 distinct primary mental abilities, and on the basis of these primary mental abilities, he has made a test. After all, assessment is to be done, the measurement has to be done. He has made a test which is known as PMA, primary mental ability. Now, he says, just because of the time, I tell you 1 or 2 mental abilities which Thurston talks about. He says, your spatial ability. Spatial ability. Spatial ability means your knowledge, your intelligence of space, direction, depth. You know, the drivers, when the old drivers I am talking, now you have a GPS system in your cars and the gadis, you know, they will give you direction. The old drivers, once they go to a particular city, next time you need not to tell them that in which direction they have to move. They learn, that is spatial. You solve the mazes, bhul-bhulaiya, clear? And then that is spatial ability. Your numerical ability, ability to solve the problem, your reasoning ability, how you are solving, how you are giving the logics, your word fluency, how you can speak fluently. I say, speak 10 words on this pen. If you have word fluency, you will be able to speak about the pen in a very spontaneous way. You know, a writer, a poet has this ability. He has word fluency. A good speaker has one, fluency. If a speaker is poor, then he, I will try, he is taking the time. He is taking the time. So, in this way, Thurston suggested 7 components of intelligence, cognitive approach, of which intelligence is made up of. So, on that basis, he made a test which is known as the mental ability, primary mental ability test. I would have taught you this theory in detail, because the topic is not here intelligence theories. Topic is simply to get aware give you an idea of the cognitive approach. Sometime when we will talk about the theories of intelligence, we will talk about all the theories in the detail. Sternberg in 1985 proposed a theory which is known as triarchic theory of intelligence. It asserts that there are 3 basic types of intelligence: componential or analytic intelligence, experiential or creative intelligence, contextual intelligence or practical intelligence. Sternberg talks about three cognitive aspects of your intelligence. That is why this theory is called as a triarchic theory. Analytic intelligence, then you have to develop a test to measure analytic ability. Creative ability, creative means thinking things in a different manner, and your practical approach. So, componential, experiential and your contextual approach. Then componential or analytic intelligence, it involves the ability to think critically and analytically. Person high on this dimension usually excel on standard tests of academic potential and make the excellent students. Experiential or creative intelligence, it emphasizes insight and ability to formulate new ideas, which I am telling you, new ideas. Person high on this dimension usually excel on zeroing in what information is crucial in given situation and at combining seemingly new facts. This is a kind of intelligence shown by many scientific genius as an inventors such as Einstein and Newton. Think creatively, give new things, clear, this grade the scientists. And contextual, person high on it are intelligent in practical adaptive sense, that they have what many would term street smarts and are adapt to solving the problem of average practical intelligence. These problems come, solve it in this way. This is thing, do this way. That is our practical intelligence. No invention, nothing doing, clear. So, Sternberg, in this way talks about, according to Sternberg, solving practical problem require a kind of different intelligence from that requires for success in school or other intellectual pursuit. To pass in chemistry, to pass in physics is different thing. To solve the problem of the life is different thing. So, cognitive approach you see in this way tells us in different angle. Similarly, Cattell's talk about, he says fluid and crystallized intelligence. What he says? Intelligence is of two types, crystallized and the fluid. Fluid intelligence refers to our largely inherited ability to think and reason in a sense of hardware of our brains, and that determine the limit of our information processing capability. Crystallized intelligence refers to accumulated knowledge information we store over a lifetime of experience plus the application of skill and knowledge to solve specific problem. In a sense, then crystallized intelligence is outcome of experience acting upon the fluid intelligence. You see, as Sternberg has talked about triarchic theory, what Cattell says, he says two type of intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is that intelligence which comes to you from your heredity, inborn, and crystallized intelligence which comes from the environment, the experience. Clear? Experience I am getting not from my heredity, but from the environment. So, if you are to measure intelligence, you will have to keep in mind you are measuring crystallized or the fluid intelligence. So, in this way, this approach, cognitive approach, also becomes important. In psychometric approach, our emphasis is only and only to measure IQ, and in cognitive approach, emphasis is on the understanding of the components of intelligence.